Okay, so you know when you're prepping for like the Goethe A1 or A2 exam,
Hmm.
and you hit that point where German grammar feels like this massive obstacle course,
Right.
and it always seems like it's those little words, the prepositions, that trip you up, right?
Absolutely.
Especially when you throw cases into the mix. Like suddenly you're staring at a sentence wondering why it's dative and not accusative or nominative for that matter.
It could definitely be a head scratcher.
Yeah, for sure. And for learners aiming for those A1 and A2 certificates, it's often the dative prepositions that feel the least intuitive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. They seem to follow a different kind of logic that you have to sort of crack the code for.
Exactly. And that's precisely why we're doing this deep dive today, to tackle German dative prepositions head on.
Great idea.
We want to make these essential grammatical building blocks, especially the ones that pop up constantly on the Goethe A1 and A2 exams, crystal clear,
Good.
so you can face them with confidence and not feel like you're lost in a grammatical maze.
I like that. Lost in a grammatical maze.
Right. And speaking of great resources, for this deep dive, we're using this awesome guide all about, you guessed it, German dative prepositions, specifically geared towards the Goethe A1 and A2 exams.
Oh, cool.
And it's put together by the fantastic team over at Language by Nikolan.
Yeah, they really know their stuff when it comes to helping learners navigate these tricky areas of German grammar.
Totally. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's zoom out for a sec and look at the bigger picture of German grammar. You know, the cases. Cases, cases, cases.
Cases, right. For anyone just starting their German journey, what are those nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive things all about?
Okay, so imagine this. German cases are like different hats that nouns and pronouns wear in a sentence, right?
Okay, I like that.
So the nominative case is like the default hat. It's usually worn by the subject of the sentence, the one doing the action.
Right.
Then you have the accusative case. This hat is often worn by the direct object, the thing being acted upon.
Makes sense.
Now, the dative case, which is our VIP guest today, this hat often indicates the indirect object, the recipient of the action, the one to whom something is given or done.
Yes.
And last but not least, we have the genitive case. This one mainly shows possession, like the book of the student, you know?
Yes.
While all the cases are obviously important for German overall,
Of course.
for our A1 and A2 focus on dative prepositions, we really just need to understand that the dative case is all about being the receiver, the one to whom something is happening.
Right. The target of the action, in a sense.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's add prepositions to this whole hat-wearing party.
Mm-hmm.
Where do these little words fit in with the cases?
Well, prepositions are those connectors, those little words that show the relationship between a noun or pronoun and other parts of the sentence.
Right, like location, time, manner.
You got it. And the thing about German prepositions, the thing that makes them so tricky, is that they actually determine the case of the noun or pronoun that follows them.
They're case dictators.
Exactly. It's like they have this little grammatical rule built right in.
They tell the nouns and pronouns which hats to wear.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the Goethe A1 and A2 exams, knowing which prepositions always go with a specific case is essential.
Absolutely.
So generally, we can put German prepositions into 3 groups based on the case they govern.
Okay, makes sense.
First up, we've got the accusative prepositions. These guys are always followed by a noun or pronoun in the accusative case.
So words like durch, through, for, against, ohne, without, around, those are all accusative prepositions, right?
That's right. Then we have, drum roll please, the dative prepositions, our stars of the show today. These guys always demand the dative case.
Excellent. So it's essential to know which ones those are.
Exactly. And then there's a third group, which is kind of cool, the two-way prepositions. They're like the rebels of the preposition world.
They can go either way. So two-way prepositions are words like and for, on, enter, behind, in, neben next to, über, under, for, in front of, and zwischen, between.
Yep, that's the gang.
And they can take either the accusative or the dative case.
And figuring out which case depends on whether we're talking about movement to a location or just being at a location.
Right. Accusative for movement, dative for location.
Exactly. So if there's movement towards something, it's accusative. If it's just a static location, it's dative.
Gotcha. So to use in as an example, in and park, I'm going into the park.
Yeah.
Would be accusative because of the movement, but if bin in dem Park
Yeah.
I'm in the park, would be dative because I'm already there.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
But for today, let's keep our focus laser sharp on those pure dative prepositions, the ones that Language by Nikolan and other great resources highlight as essential for the Goethe A1 exam.
Yeah, the ones that are always dative no matter what.
Exactly.
Sounds good. Let's jump right in. At the A1 level, getting a good grasp of these core dative prepositions is super important.
Right. You see them everywhere in basic German.
Absolutely. And they'll definitely be on the exam.
So let's start with aus, a classic.
Definitely a classic. When I see aus, I immediately think from a place. But it's not just about location, is it?
No, it can also be about what something is made of, like der Tisch ist aus Holz. The table is made of wood.
Exactly. So we have from for location and made of for materials.
And in both cases, the noun after us is in the dative.
Right. Like in the example you just gave, Holz is dative because of aus.
Okay, so aus is pretty versatile. What's our next must-know dative preposition for A1?
Let's talk about bei. This one's interesting because it can mean a few different things: at, near, or with.
Ah, so it's a bit of a chameleon then.
You could say that. It often refers to location, like being at someone's house or near a specific place.
Like, ich wohne bei meinen Eltern. I live with my parents.
Perfect example.
Ah.
Or, das Café ist beim Bahnhof. The cafe is by the train station.
Right, so it can be spatial or it can show a relationship, like living with someone.
Exactly. It can even mean at in some work-related contexts, like ich arbeite bei Google. I work at Google.
So bei covers quite a bit of ground then. What about mit? I feel like that one's a bit more straightforward.
Yeah, mit is pretty direct. It mainly means with, and it's all about accompaniment or the way something is done.
So like, ich fahre mit dem Bus. I go by bus.
Exactly. Mit dem Bus tells us how you travel.
Or, ich lerne Deutsch mit meiner Freundin. I'm learning German with my friend.
Perfect. Their mit shows who you're doing the action with.
So pretty easy to grasp then. What's next on our dative preposition A1 hit list?
Let's move on to nach. Nach has two key meanings you absolutely need to know for A1.
Okay, hit me.
First, it means after, when you're talking about time.
And second?
Second, it means to, when you're going to cities or countries that don't usually have an article, or when you're talking about going home.
Okay, that makes sense. I always get tripped up by the whole no article thing with cities and countries.
It's definitely something to pay attention to. So, for example, you would say, nach der Arbeit gehe ich nach Hause. After work, I go home.
Because house is home, and it doesn't have an article, so we use nach.
Right. And another example would be, wir fahren nach Berlin. We're going to Berlin because Berlin doesn't take an article in this context either.
Got it. So, no, the Berlin when you're heading there. Okay, what about seit? I know that one signals a time period that began in the past and is still going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It means since or for when you're talking about something that started at a specific time in the past and is still happening now.
Like, ich lerne Deutsch seit 3 Monaten. I have been learning German for 3 months.
Exactly. The learning started 3 months ago and is still going strong.
Okay, so seit is all about continuous action that started in the past. What about von? That one has a couple of meanings too, right?
That's right. Von can mean from when talking about origin or who gave you something.
Like, das Buch ist von meinem Bruder? The book is from my brother?
Precisely. It shows where the book came from.
And it can also mean of, to express possession or a connection.
Yes. Like in the sentence, die Schönheit der Natur, the beauty of nature. Der Natur is in the genitive case. But in simpler A1 or A2 sentences, you might see von used in a similar way to express a relationship, although genitive is the more formal way to show possession.
Okay, so von can be about origins or relationships. What about our last A1 dative preposition, zu?
Zu. This one usually means to, when you're heading towards a person or a place that typically has an article.
Like, ich gehe zum Arzt. I am going to the doctor.
Exactly. Or sie geht zur Bibliothek. She is going to the library.
And it's super important to remember those contractions, summen and zur.
They trip everyone up at first.
Totally. Sum is just su plus dem, and sur is su plus der.
Exactly. Now, zu can also mean at when you're talking about being at home.
So if I'm at home, I would say, ich bin zu Hause.
Correct.
But if I'm going home, it's ich gehe nach Hause. Right.
That's a crucial distinction for A1. Nach Haus for the action of going home, and zu Haus for the state of being at home.
Awesome. So to quickly sum up our essential A1 dative prepositions,
Let's do it.
we have aus, meaning from or out of, be for at, near, or with, mit for with, nach for after or to, in those specific A1 contexts. Seit, meaning since or for, von for from or of, and zu for to or at.
Having those down pat will give any A1 learner a huge advantage.
Absolutely. Now, when learners level up to A2, the preposition game gets a bit more challenging, right?
It does. You still use all those A1 prepositions all the time, but at the A2 level, you'll be introduced to a few new dative prepositions that you'll need to know.
Like the A1 prepositions weren't enough, right?
Right. And Language by Nikolan is great for covering these additional A2 prepositions too.
Okay, so what are these new additions to the dative preposition family?
Well, there are three main ones: außer, gegenüber, and ab.
Sounds intimidating.
Not at all. They're all manageable once you understand how they work.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's break them down one by one. What about außer? What does it mean?
Außer essentially means except for or besides. It's all about exclusion.
So if I wanted to say everyone was at a party except my brother, I'd use außer.
Exactly. You could say, alle außer meinem Bruder waren auf der Party. Everyone except my brother was at the party.
Got it. So außer singles someone or something out.
Right. It sets them apart from the group.
Makes sense. Now, what about gegenüber? That one always looks a bit more complex.
It's a bit unique grammatically. Gegenüber means across from or opposite.
So it's about location.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Unlike most prepositions, gegenüber often comes after the noun it relates to.
Oh, so the word order is different.
That's right. So instead of saying gegenüber dem Museum, opposite the museum, you would say die Museum gegenüber.
Ah, okay. So the preposition trails behind the noun it's describing.
Exactly. And remember, that noun is still in the dative case because of gegenüber.
So it's like gegenüber is playing a little game of grammatical tag.
I like that. It's definitely something to keep in mind, especially for the A2 exam.
Okay, so we've covered außer and gegenüber. What about ab? What does that one do?
Ab generally means from or as of, and it usually indicates a starting point in time.
Like when something begins?
Precisely. Think of it as marking the beginning of a period or an action.
Could you give me an example?
Sure. You can say, ab morgen arbeite ich nicht mehr. From tomorrow on, I won't be working anymore.
Ah, so ab pinpoints the start of a new situation.
Exactly. It tells us when the change happens.
So for A2, we're adding außer, except for gegenüber, across from, and remember it often comes after the noun, and ab from, as of.
Right.
They definitely add an extra layer of complexity to the dative preposition game.
Definitely. But they're all essential for A2, and they're really not that scary once you understand how they work.
Okay, now that we've reviewed all those dative prepositions, let's take a step back and think about their overall role in a German sentence. We know they force the following noun or pronoun into the dative case, but what kind of information are they actually giving us?
Good question. Their roles are actually quite diverse, just like we've been seeing.
Right, like they're not just about location, are they?
Nope, not at all. One of their key functions is to signal the indirect object of a sentence.
Which is the recipient of the action, right?
Precisely. Some verbs inherently take dative objects, but dative prepositions also create those indirect objects within prepositional phrases.
So they add more details about who or what is receiving the action.
Exactly. It's like adding a little spotlight to the recipient.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about location? We touched on that briefly when we talked about those two-way prepositions.
Right. Dative prepositions are often used to express a location where something is or where an action takes place, but without any movement towards that location.
Ah, so it's about being at a place rather than going to a place.
Exactly. And that's what sets them apart from the two-way prepositions used with the accusative case, which always imply movement towards a destination.
Right. So in dem Park, in the park, is dative because it describes being in the park, not going into it.
Precisely. Dative for static location, accusative for movement towards.
Okay, that distinction is key. What other information can these dative prepositions give us?
Well, some, like seit and ab, have a very clear time-related function.
Like they tell us when something starts or how long it's been going on?
Exactly. Seit tells us the starting point, and ab tells us the point from which something is valid.
So like, seit einer Stunde warte ich, I've been waiting for an hour, shows duration.
Right. And ab morgen bin ich im Urlaub, from tomorrow on, I'm on vacation, shows the start of a new state.
Makes sense.
And then we have prepositions like aus and von, which can indicate origin or source.
Like, sie kommt aus Frankreich, she's from France.
Perfect example. It tells us where she originates from.
Okay, so we have location, time, and origin covered. And we also talked about how mit and bei can show accompaniment or the means by which something is done.
Yes, mit dem Flugzeug, by plane, tells us the mode of transport, and by meiner Oma, yeah, my grandma's, could indicate company.
Exactly. And while not as common at the A1 and A2 levels, dative prepositions can sometimes also imply possession or relationship in certain contexts.
Right, although genitive is usually the go-to case for expressing possession more formally.
It's fascinating how much these seemingly small words can do in a German sentence.
They really are the unsung heroes of grammar.
Right. So shifting gears a bit and thinking specifically about the Goethe exams again, what should learners really focus on when it comes to dative prepositions for the A1 level?
For A1, the absolute must-haves are those core dative prepositions: aus, be, mit, nach, seit, wann, and du.
The Magnificent Seven.
Exactly. You need to be super comfortable understanding their basic meanings and using them correctly in those everyday A1 scenarios.
Like talking about where you're from, describing locations, saying who you're with, giving directions to cities, countries without articles, or going home and expressing durations of time.
Right. And resources from Language by Nikolan are fantastic for practicing those A1 specific contexts.
So what kind of questions can learners expect on the A1 exam that will really test their dative preposition knowledge?
You'll likely see fill-in-the-blank questions where you have to choose the correct dative preposition.
The classic fill in the blank.
Yep. There might also be matching exercises where you pair prepositions with parts of sentences.
So you have to match the preposition to the context.
Exactly. And you might also get short answer questions where you have to create simple sentences using specific dative prepositions.
Like use bei in a sentence about your family or something like that.
Something like that. And you might even see picture-based tasks where you describe a scene using prepositions.
So you have to say where things are in the picture, and that will probably involve using those two-way prepositions in their dative form too.
Precisely.
So it's not just about memorizing the prepositions themselves, but understanding how to use them in real-life situations, something that Language by Nikolan does a great job of addressing.
Absolutely. Okay, now how does the focus on dative prepositions change as learners move on to the A2 exam?
Yeah, does it get even harder?
Well, at A2, you're still expected to know those A1 dative prepositions like the back of your hand.
So those Magnificent Seven are still important.
Oh, definitely. But the A2 exam will also test your knowledge of those additional A2 dative prepositions: außer, gegenüber, and ab.
The A2 trio.
Exactly. You'll need to understand their meanings and be able to use them accurately in sentences.
So being able to express exceptions, describing locations relative to other things, and indicating starting points in time.
Exactly. And again, resources from creators like Language by Nikolan are super helpful for practicing these A2 level skills.
So for A2, it's about expanding your dative preposition vocabulary and using those new prepositions in more nuanced ways.
Right. The A2 exam will test your ability to understand the subtleties of meaning and use those prepositions in a wider range of contexts.
And will the types of questions be different on the A2 exam compared to A1?
You'll probably see more complex fill-in-the-blank exercises where you have to really pay attention to those tiny differences in meaning between the preposition options.
So they really test your nuanced understanding.
Exactly. You might also get sentence transformation tasks where you have to rephrase sentences using different dative prepositions.
So you have to keep the meaning the same, but change the prepositions.
Right. And you'll definitely encounter reading comprehension passages where you have to understand those prepositions in context.
So no more isolated sentences. You have to figure out the meaning within a bigger text.
Exactly. And in writing tasks, you'll need to use a wider range of dative prepositions accurately to describe situations or tell stories.
So they want to see that you can actually apply these prepositions in your own writing.
That's right.
So A2 is definitely a step up in terms of both the breadth and depth of dative preposition knowledge required.
Definitely. But it's totally manageable with consistent practice and by using targeted resources.
Like those from Language by Nikolan, right?
Precisely. Okay, now, for anyone listening who wants to really nail these dative prepositions for the Goethe exams, what kind of practice would you recommend?
Yeah, where should they go to sharpen their skills?
There are tons of great resources online. Websites like German.net have a bunch of preposition exercises, and many of them focus specifically on dative prepositions.
So you can really target your practice.
Exactly. And then there's germancenter-st.com. They have a whole bunch of A1 and A2 exercises, and you'll often find sections dedicated to the difference between accusative and dative prepositions.
That accusative-dative distinction is so important.
It really is. And then we have germanzone.org. They also have specific exercises on dative prepositions, like those fill-in-the-blank activities we talked about.
Sounds like a good mix of options.
Definitely. And of course, we have to mention Language by Nikolan again. Their website and their other materials are packed with exercises and explanations that are specifically designed to help you ace the Goethe exams.
They really are a go-to resource for Goethe prep.
Totally. And don't forget about the power of videos. Platforms like YouTube have loads of channels, including Language by Nikolan's channel, that provide visual and auditory explanations of dative prepositions.
So you can actually see and hear how they're used.
Exactly. And that can be really helpful, especially for visual and auditory learners.
So the key is to find the resources that work best for you and to practice regularly.
Right. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
So we've got websites, we've got videos, and we've got those awesome resources from Language by Nikolan. There's really no excuse not to practice.
None at all. Mastering these dative prepositions is a crucial step towards becoming more proficient in German, especially if you have your sights set on those Goethe exams.
Absolutely. Well, I think this has been a really informative deep dive into the world of German dative prepositions.
I agree.
Hopefully everyone listening now feels a little less intimidated by these tricky little words and more prepared to tackle them.
I hope so.
Understanding these dative prepositions is essential for constructing grammatically correct and natural-sounding German sentences.
Right. They're the glue that holds so much of the language together.
Exactly. And by really focusing on the specific prepositions that are relevant to each level, those A1 essentials and those A2 additions, and by practicing their grammatical functions, learners can really build a strong foundation for their German skills.
Absolutely. And resources like those from Language by Nikolan can be a huge help along the way.
Totally. So as you continue your German language journey, think about how these small but mighty prepositions are shaping not just the grammar of your sentences, but also how you express your thoughts in this new language.
It's amazing how much these little words can influence the way we think and speak in another language.
So true. What new connections and understandings can you now make in everyday German thanks to this deeper understanding of dative prepositions and the resources available to you? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into dative prepositions.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.